All right, so yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and Shanna and Ian and the team for giving us an opportunity. But yeah, this is something we created specially for Comfycon after a few different conversations, and inspired by partially Shanna's and Mike's presentation with two different aspects on a topic around the Cold War gear. So that was awesome when you guys did that presentation. But yeah, we're here today to talk about hacking your people networks and from a red and blue perspective. So let me go to the next slide. Bianca, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, Bianca Binns here. First, I just want to say thanks for having me. This is my first Comfycon, so really excited to be here and see the different discussions going on. So from my background, so I come from a cyber background with a bit over 10 years experience in government, and most of these years have been on looking at the red team side of things, and more from probably a human perspective, more than a technical perspective. So excited to talk through a couple of concepts today and how we can use those red techniques for good. Thanks, Prescott.
All right, and yeah, thanks, Bianca. So I've had about 20 years or plus in industry now, mostly on the blue side. So it's an interesting flip to Bianca's insights, and like doing this presentation, we've been like, did you know about this? No. Did you know about this? No. So even we're learning from here as well, which is really nice. So yeah, so I've worked across government, enterprise, global enterprise, and helping protect critical infrastructure over all that time. So hopefully we've got some good insights to lend to everyone today. So you all have a choice. Are you going to attack or defend your career? Are you going to take the red pill or the blue pill at the end of the day from this presentation? Secretly, I think Bianca's going to absolutely kill this one. So I think everyone's going to vote team red at the end of this.
Sorry, you just made me nervous.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk through some red teaming perspectives on how you might approach social situations in your career, and also think about some blue team frameworks and how they might help as well. Got an awesome matrix-like transition there. So yeah, I know it's said a lot of times, but the hybrid workplace has really changed how you build your social networks, especially around your professional relationships in your career. And while Comfycon's sort of great to do from the comfort of your own gaming chair, as is the case with me today, really to really progress things and get your career to take off, you've got to get off the couch a little bit. Be brave. Don't be afraid of failing, I think is a theme that comes out a lot these days. Just give it a shot, give it a chance. Be curious about what's out there and what other people may think, and other viewpoints, other cultures. And thinking back to the first presentation, the keynote of the day, which was terrific about how Aboriginal culture can integrate into what we do. But also be careful. And I think through Bianca's parts today, you're going to get an idea of the types of things that red teamers might be interested about you. The other point I make is that you're not alone out there in your professional career. Sometimes it may seem that way, that you're working from home, you don't really interact with people a lot, but you aren't alone. There's lots of people out there who are, and I think over the last 4 or 5 years, industries, the cyber scene's really shifted a lot. I think Shanna made the point earlier as well, that it's a very welcoming environment now. Just get out there and talk to people. You'll find that you can learn a lot from each other, and really shift your mindset about what you can achieve by helping to build your network. You're going to need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, and if you just put some thought into it and think about it, and hopefully this gives you some framework today, you can actually achieve a lot. So without further ado, I'm going to throw over to Bianca for the interesting part of this presentation.
No pressure. Thanks, Prescott. So we're going to jump into the core, one of the core red principles, which is rapport. So rapport is the most fundamental principle you can have, and is the key to building any kind of baseline of a relationship. So you've got to apply rapport across a whole bunch of different professional levels, no matter how senior someone is, no matter how junior they are. It's vital for building those establishing blocks in relationships. It's important to remember that rapport doesn't look the same for everyone. So, you know, there may be a whole heap of rapport you need to build up with a particular person, but then another person could be completely opposite and you don't need to build that as an extensive of a baseline for rapport. So I guess the key thing there is understanding, I guess, your target profile. And knowing what you want to achieve out of that conversation. So, you know, when we're talking about rapport, we need to have an objective in mind. So are we just wanting to establish a professional relationship? Are we just wanting to establish a friendship? Or on the flip side, do we want to know information about something specific to a project or something, you know, more work related? And so that's where the elicitation technique comes in. So that's essentially, you know, identifying a piece of information you want to know and using techniques to draw it out of them. So if we step back just slightly, so we need to assess our target, right? That's really important. So who's on the other end of us building rapport with them? So you can't come in and talk about how you've gone clubbing on the weekend and you've done all this, you know, you've gotten drunk and done all this stuff, probably with a, you know, a middle-aged man who's quite the introvert and family guy. Like, you're probably not going to find that point of commonality with him. So profile them, understand what their public persona is, and try and find points of commonalities to build those rapport establishing blocks. So how do we bring rapport and elicitation together? So you can do rapport and should do rapport without elicitation, but you cannot do elicitation without rapport. And this is where we come into this hourglass concept. So you start very broad, you're talking about your weekend, your hobbies, personal things, etc., etc. You're starting kind of, you know, fairly wide, and then you're slowly pivoting your way into narrowing the discussion around what you want to elicit about that person. So start shaping the discussion where it naturally comes into a point that you can ask that key question or that key objective that you want to know. Now, on the other end, you may or may not receive what you've asked. You know, it's a 50-50 shot, right? But don't keep pressing at it. There's always other occasions to come back to this and find other ways to get an answer to your question. So that's when we start to see the transition out the other side of the hourglass. So start then re-diverting and pivoting away from that question and start going back to that rapport, finding those points of commonality and leaving the, I guess, the discussion and the relationship at a more of a friendship level versus, you know, where you've asked the question on what you want to elicit them. So think about it in the context of like an industry event where you've identified that your objective is to build credibility amongst your peers and just establish relationships in the industry. So always think of this hourglass concept. If there's anything you can take away from today, take away this hourglass concept because it's applicable in so many different situations. So, you know, you don't always have to be eliciting information, by the way. It's just kind of built in there. But build the rapport bank up with whoever's on the other side of it, because there will come a time that you want to spend that rapport, and we can talk a little bit about that later. Next slide. Thanks, Prescott. So we've got influence techniques as well. And again, this, you know, similar to elicitation, you're not always going to be eliciting or using or needing to influence someone to do something, but it's really just to talk through some of the concepts. So influence comes in many forms. So I'm only just listing a few here. So social proof is basically when you're seeing people will do things that they're seeing others will do. So this can come in a lot of different formats, but it could be someone on LinkedIn that's from a, you know, highly reputable cyber vendor, for example, and they've broken these record sales, and you've seen that there's some really big high-profile orgs that have brought into this concept. So you're immediately influenced and drawn into this because you've seen that your peers and people you probably look up to are buying into something. So that is that kind of influencing technique. We've got scarcity. So then you're attaching more value to something that's limited in quantity. Therefore, I guess you're enabling another person or a group to be influenced by that thing. So an example of this could be the first 10 people to reply to my offer will get the gold platinum subscription of whatever product versus the standard one. And hey, call in 30 minutes and you'll probably get this other thing for free on top of it. And I know I'm guilty of being sucked into those concepts, but it's a really good technique to influence someone to do something. We then got authority, so individuals who are authoritative, credible and knowledgeable experts within their fields. We know they're typically more influential and persuasive than those who aren't. So, for example, if your organisation gets a phone call or a email from the head of the cyber security centre and says, hey, your organisation is about to be attacked, be aware, you're likely to take that advice because that person or that organisation is incredibly credible versus probably, Joe down the street from another different cybersecurity firm. So authority can have quite a significant influence. And then finally, liking. So this is fairly straightforward, but, if you want to influence someone to do something, get them to like you. It's that simple. So point out your attributes you've got in common with someone, flatter them. The perfect example was on the slide before where Putin and Kim had, found their love of horses together. Oh, you like horses. I like horses. Let's talk about horses. There's your natural trajectory for where you can take your friendship and build that rapport. And so we move into credibility now. So you've obviously identified your objective by this point and what you want to achieve with that person. And you've built up a network of cyber professionals, and part of your rapport building could be talking about web hosting, for example. And I know nothing about web hosting, so please don't drill down on any of that from me, just using it as an example. So you want to get on their radar. You want to talk about, you want to make an impression with this person about your web hosting skills. You can't talk a big game if you can't demonstrate your experience. So when you get the opportunity to showcase your skills, you've got to do it. And you need to be credible in the eyes of that person when they want to involve you in, a body of work that's relating to, something to do with whatever skills you're claiming to have, essentially. But without that, you've got to backstop that as well. So put yourself out there. Think about our industry. So we are building networks and looking at LinkedIn and different people's profiles. You should be promoting what you've done where it's permissible, of course. But, what's your expertise in? You're looking at Windows, you're looking at Linux. Do you have specific certifications? Are you doing any cool projects at home? All those things are super important to share and promote about yourself and about your skills. It will go a long way. Next slide. Thanks, Prescott. Okay, so I want to talk through, I just want to give an example, which I've made up, obviously, just bringing how you can bring multiple techniques together. So you don't need to think about these techniques in seclusion of one another. So we've identified our objective, which is the key part I've been talking about. So, when does Kimmy get his supplies delivered? So we start our hourglass at the top. They're building rapport. How are you? Let's talk about our barber, etc., etc. Then we move into Kimmy using the social proof technique. So he's done this by stating that his barber is the best in town and he's seen him for 40 years. So he must be the best then, right? Sure, I'll take that on face value. So that's the social proof concept there. And then we move into Putin using the flattery technique where he's talking about Kimmy's fade being high and tight. Well, you're probably stroking his ego and building rapport naturally then, and you're kind of playing up to, his ego essentially. And then we move into the authority principle. So he has said here, I'm a busy man, don't be late. So he's outwardly projecting that authority. And look, that can be, I guess, perceived as authoritative, but, you know, perception and reality can be different, and that's probably a discussion for another day. Then we're starting to come down into that narrow part of the hourglass at this point. So we're moving to our elicitation technique. So Putin's assessed that he's built a good level of rapport here. He's ready to ask his question to achieve his objective. Now you can see that he's asked the question. He hasn't asked that direct question, but you don't need to ask the direct question in order to achieve your objective. He's worked it in a way that still gets the outcome that he wants. And because that level of rapport there, Kimmy has naturally kind of come back and said his response, which achieves what we want to know. And so it can be tempting at that point to then keep diving further down, whether that be like about a work project or whatever it is that you've had answered. Like you get excited because you've had your intent kind of answered. Don't keep pressing on that point. Don't go down a rabbit hole. Start pivoting out the rapport hourglass out the other end. So go back to your weekend, your football, whatever other things that you can talk about, and leave the conversation on more of a friendship level versus, what you've tried to elicit from him. Okay, we'll move on to the final slide there from me. All right, so I'm going to talk through a hypothetical professional scenario with you, Prescott. So we've identified our objective. So our objective is we want to build networks and position yourself as a valuable asset in GG IT solutions. This is all made up, of course. So Prescott, you've done your target assessment and you've gone out and found out all this information about them. What's your approach? Who do you think the best approach is to achieve your objective?
Yeah, well, probably target one hits a bit close to home for me. But just thinking about the two targets you've got identified there, one's probably really busy and is a bit dismissive and probably hard to get a hold of. So it's going to probably take longer to get that relationship going. I think going into that, the target two as the executive assistant to that person, where we can sort of build that rapport about the AFL, because I love the AFL. I'm a Kilda fan. So I think a lot of people are aware of this these days. But in terms of a social networking sense, if Jenna did the introduction of me to Hamish, I think that's probably a better in.
Yep. And look, there's no right or wrong answer here, right? Like there's two different ways you can approach it. Jenna's obviously got a really, she's probably got a lot of good connections. She's been there for a while. She knows a lot of people. And so she can probably be used as a vector to influence. Whereas Hamish, he's probably less of a building rapport type of guy and probably putting your value up front to him because of some of his motivations and things. Cool. All right, we'll move on then.
Yep. Thanks, Bianca. So we're running a bit short on time, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to fly for it. Like I said, yours is the more interesting one, so that's fine. But talking about the flip side of this and blue teaming in your social networks. So blue teaming, for those who don't know, is more on the defensive side. So in this case, we're sort of thinking about if someone's trying to establish a relationship with you using red teaming techniques like Bianca's outlined here. What sort of how do you think about that? Blue teaming is really hard, and it's a team sport, something you need to do together. So I really encourage people who want to work in a blue team environment or do, they reach out and build that network to generate some resiliency. You so you have someone to talk to when things are going wrong, like have been lately in the Australian economy. But the good characteristics I see of a blue teamer is someone who has a really proactive mindset. They're thinking about how things can be done differently, show a bit of curiosity, continue looking to improve themselves and learn, and have that internal resilience that they'll keep trying again and again and again. So they're the skills that I look for in a SOC analyst, typically. But you can also think about how you use those skills in a social setting. Be curious about other people, be proactive and reach out and build a network. Generate some resiliency, have some conversations, be open, tell people how you're feeling. And I'd just like to give us a shout out to anyone who has reached out to one of these companies that have been breached lately and offered help. You know, taking someone you know there for a coffee to talk through it. These are all important things that are going on right now. So one of the, I think, important things to counter people who may be trying to get at you for the wrong reasons from a networking perspective is thinking about your cognitive biases. And there's some great training available from Chris Sanders with his investigation theory that talks about from a analyst mindset, how you approach some of these things around confirmation biases, hindsight bias, anchoring, bandwagon bias. I'm not going to go through all these right now, but the point here is to really challenge what are your assumptions on how you're networking with other people, and think about your own personal algorithm. We hear a lot these days about the algorithms that Twitter might use to sanitize content in the platform or others. What's the algorithm that you're using to sanitize? Have you considered many different points of view? And then what is the way you're going to approach that to train your algorithm to be more effective to help you with your professional networking? The other thing to think about, and this sort of touches on what Bianca was talking about before, is what's the outward persona that you are emanating as a blue teamer. Check where your personal information is, how much you're giving away, or how much you want to give away. You may be quite open with what you want to share. My last slide here is really thinking about a framework for how you might do this. Obviously, a lot of people would know about the NIST cybersecurity framework. But what I want to do here is think about putting yourself as the system that you're trying to protect. You're at the center of your career here, and subject of influence from a number of sources. Sometimes it's nice to be elicitated, but there's going to be people who want to develop that relationship, and you're going to want to drive it. So you can step through the NIST framework, but with a lens of a professional relationship. So identify your personal strengths and weaknesses. Protect yourself by just taking some baby steps and getting out there. Build up your courage as you're going along, and define what you want to give out to the market. Detect when your biases might be in play, and review how you are taking those actions when you're reaching out and networking people. Curate your relationships. Be really active in that. Help others. And then when you do make a mistake, and everyone will, I've made lots of them as well, if you take that time to be honest and open with other people, just like Bianca said, try again with another sort of lens to it, and don't burn yourself out. There's always going to be opportunities to build those relationships over time. So I'll throw to Bianca just to quickly close it out.
I'll be super quick, sorry. So key takeaways, I guess, from our chat. Make sure you define your objective. So what do you want to achieve with that person on the other side, or that group? So really know ahead of time, so then you can plan your approach. Assessing your target. So what do you know about them? What's their outward persona? What are their personality traits? What are their motivations, weaknesses, anything that you can use to inform your approach? And this will feed into planning your operations. So you've got your end state objective. So how do we work backwards from that? Let's plan this out and identify what approaches are going to be best to use in this sort of situation to achieve your end state objective. And then finally, improve your techniques. So go to different industry events and practice on different people that you don't know. It's not comfortable, I know, and I'm putting myself in an uncomfortable position today by doing this presentation, because I hate them, but it's you grow personally and professionally from these things. So just throw yourself out there and give something a crack. What's the worst that could happen?
All right, cool. Thank you everyone for listening in.